Well, well, it is indeed a joy to see you all, and I'm aware that we are late starting, so I better crack on before the pub starts. I believe the heavy metal that might come later. This is metal of another sort. Anyway, I'd just like to say a bit about the beginning of this poem and the poem maybe itself. This is about Gordon Pirrie, my father, and the water meadows that are the three protagonists, if you like, in this poem. But even if you were never in this teacher Gordon Pirrie's classes, as I was not, he was a great teacher. He was physically small and slight. He had thick, sort of pebble-thick glasses and was intensely interested in everything. He was like a magnifying glass that let you see things you could not ordinarily see. But he believed in me and in my ability to read poems and to act on the stage, which is what I wanted to do with my life. So his belief was crucial to me. He directed me in plays that interested him. We did Ibsen's Pillars of the Community, we did Shakespeare's King John, and one about Keats. It was this shared love of art and performing that was the bond that led to great friendship, and he came to occupy my mind and my heart like a father. But this poem is an homage to him, begun in my mid-30s and finished during the lockdown of 2020. When he was 36, he gave up teaching for farming. He left Winchester with his family for a small holding in southwest Wales, and he soon began to translate La Fontaine fables into English verse. When he was 46 and I was 33, he killed himself in springtime, inexplicably, throwing himself under a tube train in London. Embankment Underground Station is the place that stands for this death, close to the National Gallery, where we would go to look at Poussin and Claude paintings. My own father was the very opposite, an immensely ambitious, imaginative businessman, tall, portly and successful, the son of a Jewish immigrant from Lithuania. He left school at 14. While Pirrie brought joy in the simple life and in art, he was worldly and powerful, like an oven with something great cooking in it, but that singed your eyebrows when you opened the door. As a schoolboy, I felt I must keep these two fathers separate, that to my dismay and grief, I must live a split life. Yet, when they did meet, I could not have imagined a deeper or richer outcome, which is another theme of the poem. Along with these two father figures, there was the water meadows between Winchester Cathedral and the college and the almshouse of St. Cross. I loved to spend my summer evenings after I'd finished my evening prep, and before bed I had 2 hours and I would go there. I knew that I was happy there. I had this sense of happiness. When I was 14, Pirrie produced the dramatized life of Keats and cast me as the poet. When I was 17, I had the vision which is central to this poem and to my life, speaking the Ode to Autumn aloud by heart one extraordinary pellucid autumn morning at the culmination of 3 intensely dark weeks, began this vision and gave it its duration. Mist, and it shows, between St. Catherine's Hill and other figures in the landscape. There they wait, cathedral, school, but from St. Cross, out past a world's most scenic cricket square, the meadows do not show. Nothing stands still. The cottage trees Keats saw here with their moss and windfalls vanish. There are streams, a path. And though I'm in my room, I dream I'm here. I dream my fathers, figures round my hearth, will catch a scent of home from their prodigal son, and greet me from far off as they return, back through the mist. Yes, dream it. Bring them near, have father glad to breathe his son's dream breath. And Piri, talk to me about your death. Others knew first. Not my turn to be told. Round Piri's circle went the shock. It spread more than the news. It seemed to squeeze the news. Each time friends passed it on, more hard, more cold, that loving cup, that sip, the unspeakable, said. The meadows where we'd strolled just lately, whose gin-clear chalk streams looked their April best, just would be where he'd seemed not that depressed. Litter there made him talk about despair, but grief and guilt I feel indoors alone insist it's me. I should have guessed it first, known before others, and forestalled the worst. But there's an order grief can't change. Cue where I've got to wait to hear the news by phone. The phone rang upstairs. Robert, I'd not been expecting. Unawares then, kind questions of mine about him ran out. Blind, I took the force of Piri's suicide. I backed off not to face it, squirmed, which came to heighten his grief, someone you could trust. I dithered, asked if he'd got the right name, said someone else's could have been mixed up. He said he'd check, at which, in me, it must have started working then, if not at first. I put down the receiver like a cup, and looking back, it's still there like a thirst. He was my friend. My father, I suppose. He couldn't die. That spring, we were so close. Time flew there by the phone. Our time, a life shared, vanished, shared since that night when I'd read Waller's Go Lovely Rose in the old school. Then it was just a poem dear to me. We'd stood in public, not like man and wife, the school mag pussy-footed round a bed where Waller's muse, pets mine, the flirting cool. But someone heard me speak the poetry. A small man with thick glasses dressed in black. It's hard to look the audience in the eye. Your pathway dark, breathing the poem's breath, like Orpheus, you must trust and not look back. It's hard to live and look at those who die. You act, they watch, the old play, love meets death. Now death is in the poem. Life's curse of unfinished business, as the therapists say. It's on my scent. I want to get away. I've got a son myself who needs my love. He's 1 year old, just walking. Tomo or Tomito, laughing, weeping, little elf who loves me. One day must he blame me for this hide and seek, this peekaboo we play. Now that he's here, I've got to find myself. Such recognition comes, they say, in stories. Our old selves dream, but they're the ones that tell the tales that will not die. Lives blocked, the way it hurts to wait forever. Bankrupts, worries, all move on when a story tells them. Well, after the reading, for the first-year boys, Piri came up to me, told me he liked the piece the way I'd read it, and his voice moved me, his firmness ushering what he thought through random checkpoint stutters. My heart ached as his head tossed. Impaired delivery brought wisdom out, shaken in a little rage, but instantly I liked him, liked the wise, definite words escaping from their cage. He liked my reading, liking twisted ties. What's more, he asked, did I like the stage? Would I act in his play? I couldn't wait, though I'd not heard of Ibsen and was fat, for Betty Burnick, plump, rouged, in a plait. Months passed, we passed twice, smiled. I tipped my hat. He taught the top sets English I had learnt, so it felt like an honour, earned or not, one spring day, in my pigeonhole, his note fixing audition times, and if they weren't free, he'd be pleased to see me at his home. Home, I felt, human in that school, and wrote, but met him in a hall, grown brown with grime, its motto tarnished, manners maketh gloom. There I read him, if you have tears, prepare to shed them now. My best piece at the time. I think of him, and silence shows me how far grief has come from schoolboy days of flair for grief to tears men shed with no words now. There were 2 other candidates. He thought he could discount them and gave me the part. Day after day, scenes came right. Time, that worm cut daily, thrived. Day 1 not only brought our first rehearsal, but another start, wonderful, for a town boy to confirm, there in the chalk stream, just below the bridge, fixed like a jewel, a trout. It wouldn't budge. Each day I found it there, till close to tears, thankful, incredulous. I called it a sign, a live brooch, pinning Piri's life to mine. That spot, that fish loved. Weeds there now, rehearse a scene for me. That pulse of cool, thrilled space, they let their hair down, feel it, still in place. He never took my classes, it seemed meant. Our year was not the academic year. Nothing was done that wasn't our free choice. I liked his kind, rich mind. He liked my voice. I take big summer parts, a King, a Sear, Shakespeare, Keats, Ibsen, back our drama went. But Piri introduced me to John Keats, whose verse I'd never read, showed me the way the best things linked. Keats' life, set as a play. First the boy frowns, then thanks to Piri, meets a great imagination he would love. I'm stalled now. Search life's old map, from above, something to salvage, make do now the street's been bombed, with wreckage, verse, some still hot stove. Our 3 Keats evenings ended, but I'd known I'd found my poet. His, my creed is love and you are its only tenet. His, the truth is what imagination on its own figures as beauty, shone in lights above father and plush green wing chairs of my youth, where he sat sagely, planning out my life. Give up French when you leave. French was a whim. Choose economics. Money helps and heals. Then smile, joke. School French spreads well, like a knife through butter, earns no bread. Yet, crossing him, I knew, crossed Keats too. Ideas unlock deals. Use your imagination. Stymied, he found ways. Imagination was his key. And if Keats' gorgeousness made Dad look mean, what ached was not a simple rift between father and art. This child of 17 saw something complex. My life, in the grips of Dad's imagination, is his beauty. I felt I understood, not greed, not duty. Dad was a poet to his fingertips, but shaped me for a world that wasn't verse, or true at all in honest ways to mine. If I could split, things I loved could combine. Stars could sleep soundly in Dad's universe on meadows sweet with bees and warbler song. But if I scorned him, I'd be lost and wrong. Imagination was our family curse. I stopped my night walks in the meadows. Then Piri put on King John, with me as king. I was due to leave the coming spring, and if I'd never act for him again, I knew we must stay friends. In time, I'd learn to drive, and Dad, who planned the best for me, would help me mix with nice types with a car, and in that Vauxhall Super, I'd return from Oxford wits to mugs of lime flower tea and other gifts our future held in store. And there was more to tell you of King John. I feared the last night party for the cast. My dad's not like you. Now you'll meet, at last, after the final curtain, uphill swan, I'll be exhausted, greasy. How I feared you and my pa would just not hit it off. He loved to hold forth, wisecrack, play the toff. I knew you'd not respond. But he appeared. You stood there, with him, on cue, nose to nose. I saw Dad speak, then stamp his foot hard on the stage. Saw you stare at him, rapt the way you'd looked years back with my Go Lovely Rose. I came up, heard him speaking from the play. Dad knew by heart a whole scene from King John. And in me, as he spoke, 2 private dreams broke surface, sure as Shakespeare's words. Twin streams plunged abreast there. The whole of me was real. Those things I thought kept you and Dad apart. Something of you ran from my father's heart to meet me, see you, watch his face, and feel, of all things, this is not a self-made man. I marvel at your father. If you can, then he and I will heal the split in you, as fathers should. As fathers will bequeath our blessing, friendship. It told me I knew that now my dad need not be opposite. This meeting here, 12 years before his death, would last. The last night party settled it. The night when Shakespeare, you and father spoke. After he'd stopped reciting, you had asked how he had come to learn the mercy scene, all through, word perfect. He then cracked a joke, which you had laughed at, but had soon unmasked. His mum, who died young, how long lost he'd been, had loved these lines. At night he'd lie in bed, hearing her read them, always in his head. He'd liked the way stern Hubert, charged to sear the tongue-tied prince's eyes, had found the heart to spare the child and stand up to the king, though he had thought this scene was from King Lear. We laughed at this, and mirth gave each a part, Hubert, the prince, and John. We made a ring where now I saw my role was real. King John, wanting the good child in me blind, thought art could split me off from father. Hubert's part I'd meant for you, but when the scene went on, the prince in Dad had wept and won your heart. This spared the vision of the child in me. By kindness, bad King John had been set free. It was a mercy scene. Your lack of side had done it all. How strange life now must seem, you wrote to me after my father died, to lose so rich a personality, someone whose son it must be hard to be. I shall remember him for a long time. For both of you, a child has cried and cried. I'm now picking up the poem at the beginning of the Meadows scene. It happened many years ago, and art and life have never shown the trust in me that they did then, when all of nature knew I was in love. The Meadows shone, but not in the light of the sun. The reeds, trees, swan, in Dian sky, stood primed since first dawn through with light, a lake of light, swan, reed, and tree, all like a father, like a lake, but heart too vast for me. The strength in Keats's lines came to my aid like oars my heart could feel, there in my hands, frail on that lake. And yet I balanced in that poem's disciplines. And like a skull, the verse skimmed this too real to bear deep light. Under radiant sky, I set out, buoyed, weighed to the gunwales, couldn't capsize. Sky sang like my mother's joy. To come on board, a glance would add it. One little glimpse of this sky, I give this upglance. Everything floods to my eyes, takes everything with a whumph, and I sink, and I step out of time. A vacuum burst, each word underwater in light. There, reeds, trees, I, before called something, had no name. Light was our state, like stars, and all so simple, with the mind equal in words to nothing. Verse whose time held strong, where I could breathe, moved rhyme to rhyme, meadows to human peace of the starlight kind. I spoke and saw, reeds, trees, swan, verse. Create love's two concentric spheres. There at the core I looked out on the meadows, stretched an arm. It shone past difference. Outlines knew they burned away from within, that rules by which things live, where bark, skin, leaf divides, break like a charm before this real light, there in things. Returned when I step back, my ground all I can give, the void but safe, my ears deaf, my mouth dumb, with love remembering its original verse. There, lasting, gone, the way stars know the night. That reeds, trees, swan include me in the light, while the song lasts. Flesh, verse, and meadows come outdoors in joy. Whatever universe it knew the same song, light was channeled by. This meadow's light, the poem of the eye, at peace with every step to the poem's end. So close to them my heart no longer runs to try to grasp the feel of trees, reeds, swans, lit like the stars, nor doubts when words descend the stair of Keats's ode, their verses climbed back to the earth, that these words also know they served that stillness, joy, joy's being so. Nor how peace breaks in Keats's last line, timed to say goodbye, to verse, to ecstasy. But with that heartbreak, self came back to me, the feeling I was giving up the ghost, the hand that felt was slipping from the glove that kept it safe. But verse which touches most, but through which I felt light twice, both heavens, of love and suffering, was twinned too, a two-way stream, love's double helix, or like Jacob's dream, going in opposite ways, some up, some down, all through its life. Verse knew what dying was. It sang the supreme praise of joy, because the vision knew the flesh would be outdone. That was the deal love struck. My armpits throbbed, my breathing burned me. Heart could not keep up. With life or not, what if my body failed? I loved this world where eyes were flesh and sobbed, where verse wets thirsts that throw away the cup. I would pay down this loss beyond repair with all my heart. Joy's dues would be fulfilled, brought back, almost to earth, the threshold stair, where heart comes back to sunlight, threshold light, which shows in things that love their lives. A coot plucks up its courage, rushes up a stream, throwing wide sky-piped ripples out of sight. A trout that kennels in a willow root stares through the eyewash of a perfect dream. Love has not ever harmed these living things. The redbreast sows more meadow as it sings, and just enough young swans to make a quorum, vote to rebuild their ruined year-old forum, where made for change the mind in every reed agrees that points of green grow back from chalk. There will be songs next spring. For now we need to bear the sense ants in their granaries talk, and gathering swallows twitter in the skies. This is now the last section of the poem, which I will pick up. The story is a wake is being held for Piri by some of his friends from school, my contemporaries, followed by a dream, which is the end of the story. There is another ending too, not a dream. It was as if at the moment I heard from Robert of Piri's death, something was born in me, a new capacity, and something that I needed to cherish and to learn from. It was a child of a sort, but with an inner reality that would grow and be with me throughout my life. I will read the last sonnet of this ending. That is the last sonnet in the poem. I wanted to wear black when Piri died. The sunlight sponge, the air light never lit. My own black sun soaked up the light outside to grieve in what the real sun couldn't catch, till loss was space, and looking into it, a dove of hope which couldn't return home, went searching like a dream in deepening piety, like nightfall on a wartime aerodrome where grief sends upward its exploring ray. This laser cruised me, calling night and day, but found no rest, for loss was vast as space. Days, many mealtimes passed, past gloom, past gaiety. My food was memory now, and grief saying grace. After his death, some friends in London met at Robert's place. 2 men, a girl, and me. We ate and drank our voluntary wake. A show of heart, brave apple cart, upset. Robert read verse on parting by H.D. The man played blues. The girl, ours ex, would break and weep, her only visit to the farm recalling La Cigale et la Fourmi, spoken by Piri with his English version, her language course, a parallel immersion, while he swayed on a wobbly henhouse form. But all knew what we could not say. His death impacted violently and did deform our hearts, which fought back short all night of breath. I spoke of Piri's trout, plays we'd rehearsed. Then there was Waller's poem at the start, not daring to look Piri in the eye, and now not able to confront his death. Feared sight once of the best, now of the worst. Robert then said he thought some works of art were mirrors to confront such horror by. How Perseus hid a bright shield underneath his cloak, approaching death on foot, alone, to see the Gorgon that he had to kill, mirror that had a shape and could contain, not be, the sight whose truth turns life to stone. Our way to look hard and draw close until there, in reflection, lies Medusa slain. The girl and I sat on the couch, with Robert cross-legged beside the third guest on the floor. When he had finished speaking, he stood up and took the tin tea caddy from the cupboard, then asked us all, should he brew up some more? I gestured yes, raising my empty cup. But why is it so hard to look, I said, at those who watch us when we act on stage? It's like the dark taboo, the unturned page where Orpheus brings Eurydice from the dead. Out of the audience, Piri's eyes on me, mine on the verse, me getting the poem right, brought us both back to life. Dark in soul light, I trusted him. He was Eurydice. That night I went to bed and had a dream, without an end. It was my fantasy. I think it is this story's end as well. It dealt with my descent to bring from hell a living light, a disembodied beam that might be Piri or Eurydice. The story has another ending, too, but waking fact, whose meaning must be kept till after what I finished while I slept. Though still entirely to do with you, Piri, it must touch also on my son. The dream begins where we broke off the wake. We hugged and left. I told the girl I'd take her home to the embankment, which I'd done. The Thames was at high tide and black. I'd known death lay ahead for me, first taking on a monstrous role, my face on an all-black swan, and then the face that turns the heart to stone. I was in a dark National Gallery. I walked and reached the Claude and Poussin room, felt different, somehow hollow in the gloom, looking at different kinds of harmony. Dismay I felt through Poussin, for a heart prepared to meet the last condition of a grand inquisitor, which it must love past thought of self, past even thought of art, colour and light. It cost the world to see. Then grief in Claude, whose heart was here in me. Since Piri's death I'd not dared come. My dream, like some mute sacrifice, now came instead. It was the black swan death sent on ahead, which swam the paintings as across a stream and stepped these stones to join the living dead. I dreamt each painting was a stretch of ground where he had rested, summer that would last, stronger than walls. Our joint black stream moved past. My step, his step. We reached the underground embankment. There, down there, his cards were cast. I stood on moving stairs that took me down, a place of execution and no grace. Sometimes in advert frames I'd see my face. Then I saw him, rear mirrored, in death's gown. We both stepped off. I stooped to tie my lace. Piri stopped too behind me. I was first to know this place. Descent in dream reversed. To torment he must not look in the face. Perhaps years back on stage, when I rehearsed in poetry what I must now perform. The way to lead that loved man watching me. Somewhere I cannot cry for help, but see his death through, find the no-love platform, checkpoint of hell. My steps, his poetry. Like candles I must blow out, line by line, to the last breath, then wake, and hell is real. Go before Piri, die to his ideal. Light no more ours to shine or not to shine. His way of death, that last thing, must I steel my heart to feel it? Piri had dared do this thing, slunk up to town that day, then through this flesh I loved under that hateful wheel. What self-hate was it? Self was me and you, Piri. I cannot look at you. You look. There is the light the tunnel starts to throw. We'll meet this train in dream before we go. Read hell headlong in London like a book. Fall between rails, smell terror from below. The April coffin where we die alive. Wolf blowing piggy's house down. Sap to stop us breathing. Wheel to rip the grain sacks. Drop the grain to suffocate the farm at 5, where we lie low like grain. We are the crop. We learn our death by heart till we are grown. Now watch like corn in death rows, to be mown scattering haywire. Hell on earth up top, waste, faceless, cuts our gold field to the bone, and black mice pit us with their little nails, while over us death's freight train, springtime, roars to Highgate, where I left my wife indoors, asleep, half singing, like our stream in Wales. And the cacophony and pain withdraws. The track goes quiet, we have learnt by heart and come back from the dream, like poetry whose meaning waits at home. Eurydice, it's time. Our journey through the dark must start. Void where we walk, but from the back of me there's light reflected on the tunnel roof. It's death that mocks us, tempts us. But no proof is strong enough for hope, Eurydice. Think when we first met, acting both aloof, for fear of losing heart by looking first. Well, now we have lost hope, have lived to lose, to stay the course foregone, postpone the news ahead. Each step we took in life, reversed. One path goes home, the one we cannot choose. Death tempts us subtly at the back of our mind, a poetry we've loved, yet in this place forgotten, something dear that had a face, now lost to us. Death lets that shine behind. The light we dread is out there in dark space, the two spots on the train that shine ahead, the eye death sees by blind the living dead, the headlights that annihilate the grace. These are the footlights lighting Piri's head. At 5, the evening, he plays out his death. The stage we act on now is not a stage. The page we write on now is not a page. The act of death undoable by breath, but done by love, to suffer this train's rage, to choose death in its path, to feel the verse suffer and spray off death's wave, break in fear and crash against our time. Coming near, it pushes, push, no time to rehearse, pushing us out of will, still pushing, here, hung out of body, hung with no control. In verse now we have died the death of soul. All hope is gone. Words come, words disappear. We are in hell. All speed is to no goal, and death's the final touch to utter waste. Touch with no second chance, touch with no friend. Verse cannot tell an impact without end. The sight, the train comes, right. It can't be faced. For sight is endless love. Though horror send its stone, its numbness, sight's a sacred act. And when I wonder how to tell this dream, the black swan neck burned on dead breast, no scream, all throat, all coil on no man's land. In fact, the moral sight, things being what they seem, made the moment violent beyond speech. Piri, when I was young, a sight did reach this pitch of utter force. My childhood theme, it rolled like sea, fast, faster, blur on a beach, till it stood still. I stood before my father. Looking from in me, eyes front, was the sense I knew my life by, focused, too intense to change or to escape. Us, one another, bound in a fate no story circumvents, our lives unreal, our lives eternally true. A chain reaction, neither pleasure nor pain, but volts passed through this arm, chest, to this brain, once started, scattering layers of me. It grew until an impact I could not contain, pushed past the brink of me, made flesh by fate, broke in my body, lifted, changed its state, hurling me free. My father watched the train, a whumph. I'm outside time, no time to wait, to hone the shield of poetry in my soul, hammer it, gloss it, to reflect what is, and put it in the hands of Perseus, to watch the worst, the head that has to roll. Medusa? No. The singer Orpheus, still singing as sword swept, head flew from heart, joy's vault still sparkling, down death's stream it fell, singing to her, forgive, and her farewell, had life, had Piri's life, the end of art. Far off, still sparkling, was the end of hell. We were alone, but these parks seemed to grow. We watched them, trusting, walking here below, brought life our way, and sparks this small would swell until their flame, like seeds the farmers sow, burst into flower. Each tells himself in dream, I know that light behind which powers me was something I once loved, but must not see, and will in time flower into this new beam, not made by sun, but by affinity. And as we stepped into that beam of light, its radiance stilled the violence of the dark. We slowed, relaxed, like souls that disembark to meet companion souls, to reunite in reeds, trees, swan, sky, chalk streams, the heart's arc, the journey's end, here, back on Meadows ground, like animals our wonder wrapped us round. Piri, I said, we're here. This mild remark, no voice came, stamped. My footstep left no sound. We walked in silence through this crowd of life to where 300 yards off, someone stood by the bird sanctuary, a little wood called Falodon. I'd thought it was my wife the dream could spirit here, then understood more than the dream map knew. I recognized my father waiting for us. Last night past, the dark play done, reunion at last, here in the meadows. Pleased but not surprised, he smiled, like dawn, like grain full grown, new cast. Then, in our dream, I heard my father say the ode to autumn. That September day, dawn, noon, a dream, no dream, passing or past, it was the mercy scene we came to play. And all I loved in Keats was there. Each line, the comfort, role play, singing, always owed to him, a heart that rose and overflowed into sufficiency. So we saw love shine, Piri and I, as father spoke his ode. His voice moved through the pilgrim steps of it. And then the light in silence was enough, on reeds, trees, swan, on us. Things spoke their love, codes spoke their breaking, scrolled in bud to fit the outspread flower. Depth then shone above, leaves, long breaths, singing shapes, stopped in mid-time, each leaf's intention and each verse's rhyme, showed us the freedom depth was singing of, as father spoke Keats' ode. He seemed to climb alongside song, he trusted poetry. Here, now, was something we three might sustain. The cup was passed, and time began again. But quiet now, song at peace with memory, come from below, the quiet of love's terrain, where I relive the dream today in mist. The chapel, the cathedral and St. Cross, all vista clear, orchards in sun-warmed moss, each apple there, like opening time's fist. I don't know how it ended. Mist is lost. The meadow's vision, Piri, now the dream, where life came back from death by this chalk stream. Piri wrapped, Dad as ever was the boss. Story that brought to life the real life theme, mercy, returned from hell. Pa giving me my soul back, lost in death I'd met below. Piri then asked him how he came to know death's timing and by heart life's poetry. It was a marvel, and we told him so. Straight-faced, his self-amusement in our hearts, he told us how his son had loved this verse, and how at night, with lights out, he'd rehearse for this performance. Had he served the arts? We laughed, said yes, and laughter broke the curse, free in whose thrall this story has been told. Unfinished business came in from the cold and found its stage, its one-time empty purse, filled by a full house, every ticket sold, bar one, for my now not so little son, who, Piri, while we played, became himself. Between this poem's drafts, we reared that elf from some midsummer night's dream, which now done, I hope he'll find this denizen of the shelf and read this far, dear son, whose dad I was, not recognizing you, Piri, of course, nor his grandfather Gerald, that dark horse, but to his why I wrote it. Well, because I could not get away from death by force, nor move on through the mist, I felt loss hide a living friend, a love that hadn't died, but trusting verse's voice, with my remorse and grief still struggling against suicide, brought him back home, like family, to my heart. Piri, let's call this mist grief's self-control that stops us checking up on nature's soul. Let's not, like death with Orpheus, pry and part ways with our love, lose if we must, till art and dream meet us, Dad, Keats, and make us whole. The other ending of this story is real. It doesn't have a dream. It's not ideal. Yet, I'm not sure dream stops when real lives start. Dreams have real lives. As father spoke Keats' ode, so true that I forgot it was a dream. I heard the song, the story music told all the time, oblivious of the mist I breathed. While we dream on, things coexist, which fall to love our juggler heart to hold. Song can be lost to Gorgon stone, no scream. But when I heard Dad speak, song overflowed into reality. More true, not less. Mist, story, dream, and poem were one thing, all at once and in turn, on the earth we know, where I once stood, in joy and in distress. So I forgot, hearing the poem sing, that life was accident. Song, let me go, back to the meadows, where all was conceived, where now I stand in mist, the story's room enlarged, swept clean, with verse's evergreen broom. Room where all's lost, and dreamt back, and believed, where time is real, where pattern with needle and thread guides what returns, brings healing from its source, heart on the threshold of sun. The poem's course a story, shared between love and the dead, making ends meet. And so my dream was real. I heard Dad speak that verse and make this space for me and Piri. But life too is real, by which I mean, dear Piri, it takes place where we can't see the hand before our face, here in the mist, and far from that ideal. This daughter, all these years beside my son, this secret sister, born at home in grief, has taught me most. It was her fierce belief by Orpheus' song in death, his will was done. She wrote the mercy scene, where life the thief was understood, where verse speaks truth to life. But there's no art in her. Joy, yes, and loss. If Robert's phone call was a hard midwife, we dream now, cottage trees, windfalls and moss, cathedral, chapel, almshouse of St. Cross, circle us in their triangle of love. You know where. Join us. I dream you are here, our Meadows. Nothing now we cannot share, in hell, on earth, or this dream just above.